Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
The Hoosier football tailgate right here on the Hoosier.com, powered by On3 Sports. On Twitter, you can follow us there as usual at Hoosier Tailgate, or my X handle as well at Coach Griff 55. Getting this used to this swing around here, trying to get back in the swing of things here. And I guess that's kind of what I want to say tonight is I have moved and I haven't got my intro readjusted yet. I have left the Believe Network, nothing of their doing, absolutely not. Appreciate all they did for me and helping me bring the Indiana Hoosiers to each and one of you each and every week on their platform. But I had the opportunity to join the Hoosier.com as a lead football analyst for them, as covering the Hoosiers, just like I've done for the last couple years on all my platforms, YouTube, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so forth and so on. And I found it too good to pass up to be a part of a more centralized, dedicated fan site such as the Hoosier.com. And the opportunity to be associated with On3 is something that I think is important as well, because they are on the move upward in terms of their content and how they cover not only NCAA football, but basketball as well. Ton of information for one to get a hold of and look up as well, whether it be NIL evaluations on top tier talent, whether it be the standard recruiting boards that you'll normally see and their ratings of it. Just a phenomenal site to look at on top of the Hoosier.com, which I have always followed and been a part of subscription-wise. All the things that are done there, and we've had Zach Browning on here before, and he represents them as well. So it's been a whirlwind of a couple, 3 or 4 days as they've made their switch over as well. And they allowed me to come aboard, and I'm appreciative to do so, and want to thank them for that opportunity. Still see me each and every week on Thursdays with Jim Coyle as it pertains to the subject matter you'll see from me on the Hoosier.com. It will be some of the same things with in-season Mondays and Thursdays, giving you a look back on Mondays to the Saturday game that the Hoosiers played, breaking down on it from the standpoint good, bad, or indifferent. And then on Thursdays, outside of me appearing with Jim Coyle on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, you will also get your standard preview of the Hoosiers Saturday game, along with some video analysis as well. And then in the off season, doing some things that in recruiting will be a little bit more of that, as well as anything that's hitting the NCAA landscape as it pertains to college football in general, so that you can stay up to date and very well apprised of everything going on as it pertains to the Indiana Hoosiers, all right here on the Hoosier.com, all powered by On3.com as well. So when you get a chance, give me a follow on both platforms, as well as at On3 Sports there. And then, of course, if you're joining us, if you're not a part of the Hoosier.com right now, they've got a really great sale going on for membership. Join for just $1 and then a 50% off for the rest of the year, which I think comes out to about $59 or something. You'll have to look there as it pertains to what they all have to offer, but it's an insane deal that they've got going on at the Hoosier.com. You can find it all there. And I'm glad to be aboard. I'm glad you're here to have you here with me this evening, even on short notice. But we're going to try to keep it consistent off season on Thursday night, 7:30 each and every week, and as well at 7:30 on both of those. And then any type of special arrangement, we'll let you know. Jim Coyle and I will always do a post-game show on every Hoosier game, after the game, following it, after all the different pressers are done. But more details on that to come. Just really excited to be a part of all this, and want to thank all those at thehoosier.com. And you can find all the guys that do a great job of covering Indiana Hoosier sports there on their site, and give those guys all a follow, because they do a tremendous job and the passion they have. And that's another reason I like to join a group of people that have a passion for something, irregardless if it is about Indiana. I just enjoy being around people that have passion for what they do. So appreciate all that. Now we got that out of the way, we're going to move that to the side, because that's not the most important thing this evening. We're here to talk about the Hoosiers and spring ball thus far, as we're heading to the near waypoint. Remember, April 17th, 8 o'clock, Memorial Stadium spring game will be on hand, coming up here in 2 weeks from tonight. Matter of fact, almost to the exact time. But April 17th at 8 o'clock, Memorial Stadium. Hope everybody we have a great turnout. The weather cooperates. It'd be great to have a great showing out for these young men as we enter into year 2 of Coach Signetti and his staff. Right now, spring ball, other than the fact that we've had a major injury that we'll talk about here in a second, halfway point, it sounds as if Fernando Mendoza is getting the hang of this offense, as Coach Signetti kind of referred to that on Monday's presser after their morning practice, talking about now is the time he starts to see guys starting just to play than think. And that first half of spring ball is a lot of thinking as opposed to reading and reacting. And now you're getting to the point now where you're reading and reacting to everything. And remember, with Mendoza at the helm, Coach Whitmer as well, the quarterback coach, the new quarterback coach who's been in the NFL, really hasn't coached his position ever since he went to the NFL, is now in charge of the quarterbacks, and Coach Signetti's kind of coaching him up. And so I'm sure he's seeing the same results with him now, more so running the show than Coach Signetti having to be there on top of everything all the time. So it's a unique setup for everything as it pertains to spring ball with all the new faces. Remember, 14 true freshmen in the program getting reps, vitally important, along with the rest of the guys that are coming back in the second half of the spring after spring break. And it's a great thing to behold. We're going to be joined here in just a second with Dylan Sinn from the Journal Gazette. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk to him about the Tyler Morris, the loss for the season due to a knee injury, non-contact knee injury, loss for the year. The young man out of Michigan who was looking to be a very important addition to the wide receiver room on top of already what they have with Surratt and E.J. Williams and Cooper and all that, took a little bit of a hit here. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about Kamara moving to the stud linebacker position. Right move, wrong move. Remember, he was down with his hand in the ground for all last year as the offside defensive end, and he had a phenomenal season carving his way into the Big Ten. And they decided to move him to a position that he actually was recruited for at James Madison, their stud linebacker, where he will be standing up or with his hand in the ground, but maybe a little bit more coverage responsibilities. So we'll see Dylan's reaction to that as it pertains to some of this. And after that, we'll talk a little bit about a film breakdown that I have done on Brody McWhorter, the 4-star quarterback out of Georgia, who has Indiana in his top 5, and he will be making his commitment announcement on May the 15th. So right around the corner, Indiana's in good company. I'm going to look at him a little bit and say, why does Indiana want the kid from Georgia? And we'll talk about the good that I've seen from him and maybe why Indiana's so high on him. But let's get to the main topics of things tonight here and get over to my man. If I can get things switched over here correctly, we haven't done that right yet. It's a little slow. And I'm trying to, there we go. We're going to bring Mr. Sinn in here in a second. Let's get it off. There we go. Dylan, can you hear me, my man? Got me, Dylan? Oh, let's do this. Let's see here. We don't want that. Oh, there we go. Dylan, can you hear me? Check 1, 2. Dylan, can you hear me? Oh, we just lost Dylan. Not good. So we'll try to get Dylan back here in a second, back into things as we get going here. And there he's already back. Let's see if we can get him again in here. Can you hear me okay?
There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, how you doing? How you doing, Griff? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, here we go. Here, I'm going to turn up your volume here and make sure we got you. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can hear you just fine. Hoping that you can hear me just as well.
Yep, I can hear you just fine. And I will say this to our audience in general. If you do hear an echo, by all means, please let me know. It's something that I've worked diligently on to try to eliminate as much as possible, but doesn't always happen the way I want it to. And if you have that, let me know and I can make corrections. But other than that, I think we're all ready to roll, my man, and with everything here tonight. And glad you were able to join us. I know this is kind of the busy time of year as you're transitioning out of the basketball season into minor league baseball season up here in Fort Wayne with the Tin Caps. They're going to start here. And then you had a little bit of the Comets as you were transitioning at the Journal Gazette to everyone. And so I'm happy that you were able to join us. And Robert, thank you for letting us know we're loud and clear. That's appreciative. A lot of things have happened here over the last couple of weeks. We left the Indiana Hoosiers for spring break. They came back, and lo and behold, we find out that Tyler Morris, the transfer from Michigan, wide receiver, speedster, I would say, has been lost for the season due to a non-contact knee injury. Now, before you answer that, this is the second Hoosier that the Indiana has lost now to a non-contact knee injury. Tyler Cherry being the other one way back prior to the playoff with Notre Dame. He also was lost to a non-contact knee injury requiring surgery, as is Tyler Morris. I guess I want to know what drill this is that's a non-contact so we can eliminate from practice, because we've lost 2 from the roster because of it, Dylan.
Yeah, it's just a really unfortunate situation. It's one of those things where you never expect, you can never really make sure that that it doesn't happen, right? You're always going to have some kind of movement during practice, and even when you're not hitting, it's always a potential for injury. But Morris is a difficult one. He was going to be a significant part of this receiver core. I thought, obviously, for a team that loses Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams in the slot, Morris was going to be a huge part of replacing those guys and what they did for this offense, which was pretty significant last year, as I'm sure everyone remembers. So they're going to need someone there to really step up. I thought it was interesting that Curt Cignetti basically said there's a chance they go out and get someone in the transfer portal because they're pretty thin at receiver right now. They moved a tight end over to receiver, basically just to kind of have the numbers for spring practice, because Mekhi Jackson, their Appalachian State transfer, also is kind of limited in practice right now as well in the spring. So it's one of those things where the numbers aren't great for IU at receiver right now, despite the fact they still have some really high-end talent with, as you mentioned, Elijah Surratt and E.J. Williams and Omar Cooper and those guys who have a lot of talent, but you need depth too. And so I think that's what this spring portal window is for, right? Is for teams to kind of suss out what they have in spring practice and then say, all right, what do we need? What do we need to go get? And I expect Indiana to go out and maybe add 1 or 2 receivers after spring practice is over.
Yeah, and if you would say to anyone out there that, hey, Indiana lost a wide receiver, and anyone had to guess who that receiver was, they would guess E.J. Williams, because he's always been the one that's been hampered by injuries all of last year. Now, he's been healthy for spring, which I think is vitally important after coming back and being persuaded out of the portal prior to spring practice. But this is a good point about spring ball, and I had made this mention on Jim Coyle's radio show. Spring ball is everything about the players and coaches being given a chance to really evaluate who they have at their position groups. And you're giving guys reps that maybe they normally haven't gotten. So it gives them a chance to really evaluate some of these young guys to see who may potentially be ready to step up now in a backup position. They got about 3 or 4 true freshmen that may figure into the equation, depending about how they are evaluated by Coach Shanahan, because that's his position group, on whether or not, like you said, do they jump into the portal and try to find somebody that gives them something better than that they already got. I don't necessarily think jumping in a portal for just a guy that may or may not be as good as what you got is the right thing to do, because you're just clouding the picture. But if they can find a guy like Tyler Morris that has some top end speed, can play the inside, that's different. And that's, like you said, is what the portal is there for. But yeah, unfortunate event for him. I hate things like that for a kid, because now you don't know what he'll do. Will he stick around? Will he, decide that he's going to leave and decide to move forward in whatever potential career that he will have a year from now, and decide to just go for the NFL and not play next year, because now he'll have to submit for a medical red shirt, which the NCAA has said they're no longer going to give medical red shirts. It sounds as if those are maybe going out the window. So it's an interesting dynamic that we see here with this pitcher with Tyler Morris.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does throw the receiver room into a little bit of question mark here over the next couple of weeks. I do think, as you said, they do have some options in the freshman class who could step up, right? I think we've all been impressed by the speed of LeBron Bond, a guy who's been pretty highly rated by the recruiting agencies. And every time you watch him on film, he just pops off the screen as a guy who really has that breakaway gear. Davion Chandler is another one who I think out of Indianapolis,
right,
is a guy who's going to be a very good player for them. The only question is can those guys be ready by the fall, right? Receivers are generally players who, if they're going to be really good in college, they show it early, right? It's not one of those things where you're like an offensive lineman where you take 1 or 2 or 3 years to develop, generally speaking. So they could certainly step up. And then just the question is, you look in the portal, do you have a guy that's better than those? Because I do agree with you. There's no reason to really take a guy if you're just going to be costing freshman snaps that basically are going to be of the same quality, right? It has to be something where you feel like you're genuinely improving your roster. And so I think that's going to be something to look at. I think it's as you said, spring practice is a time where position coaches get to figure out what they have, and we're going to find out what they have in these freshmen pretty quickly, based on what they do in the portal and how much trust they have in these guys.
Yeah, and if there is one position on the offensive side of the ball that is, I don't want to sound as if it's, not, overly difficult or something that somebody can achieve with a few reps, it's wide receiver, in the sense that you can pick it up pretty quickly. So some of those freshmen that you just mentioned, I do think probably will be in a position to be able to be a backup role and, get that 10 to 12 snaps a game that they would need potentially. And therefore they're moving those guys along as well in their process of getting ready for not just this season, but seasons to come, because the more you can get those guys actively involved, it stays off the possibilities of someone wanting to jump into the portal at any given time because of whatever the scenario is. So we'll see what all happens there. Sorry for Tyler. It's a tough deal, and hopefully whatever surgery he's having, and it's not too serious, and he can bounce right back and get himself back into the swing of things quickly. But unfortunately, knee injuries usually take about at least 9 months for proper healing and up to a year to really get yourself feeling better in that regard. The other news was Kamara moving to the stud linebacker position. He was last year a defensive end with his hand in the ground, and he made his presence known in the Big Ten as he was a nightmare for left offensive tackles and right offensive tackles, depending on where the ball was spotted. A remarkable first year for a young man that most would say is a little bit undersized in the Big Ten, and that's probably why he wasn't initially recruited in the Big Ten. But now he moves back to a stud position, which he was actually recruited for at James Madison and played that position as a freshman. And what they like to do with the stud backer is they can kick him down to get into a four-man front, or they can stand him up to be more of a true 3-4 and put some, different responsibilities. But it also allows them to maneuver him into positions where maybe he can rush the passer better. Kind of your thoughts on that move as we head into the latter part of spring ball here.
Yeah, I found it really interesting, quite frankly, because he was so good at that with his hand in the dirt last year that it's one of those things where you almost don't want to mess with success. But the fact that they did it, they convinced him to come back, which obviously he was deciding whether to go to the NFL draft, right? Because he had the opportunity to do so. So they convinced him to come back, and then the fact that they made this decision after doing that and after putting in the effort to get him back suggests to me they feel really strongly about it, right? This is not something they just did on a whim, because the potential downside is that you're losing a guy who was really, really good with his hand in the dirt. So you better have something where he's going to be even better with doing what you're doing in the new season. So they obviously feel very strongly about it. It's one of those things where we're going to have to wait and see until obviously the spring game here a little bit to see him in live reps, and then obviously the season. But this is what you pay Kurt Snetti and Bryant Haynes for, is to make these kind of decisions. They are now making the very big bucks after an offseason of extensions. They deserve every bit of it after what they did last season, and these are the type of calls they are paid to make. You're sacrificing a really, really good player for potentially a great one. And that is the idea here, I would assume, and we'll have to see how it plays out. I am interested in that. It's something I'm going to be watching.
Yeah, and I think it was the sell that if you look at his possibilities being a NFL player, it's probably going to be at a position like a stud linebacker rather than a guy that's putting his hands in the ground and playing 60 or 70 snaps there just because of his size, not because he's not good enough. It's just the size and reach and things of that nature. So moving him out to the stud and allowing him to show what he can do at that position on tape only helps him put together a 2-year tape of I can do this and I can do that, which improves his draft stock. So it's really it'll be an interesting thing to see. I think he'll handle it quite well. I just think he's one of those guys that has a high motor, and you tell him where to go and what to do, and he knows it, and you never have to worry about him again from that standpoint. And I would say outside of him, the biggest question right now is going to be who's aligning next to Fisher. I mean, they've got a couple guys back that played significant downs a year ago during the year, but who is going to be that guy that it becomes a part of the dynamic duo that Walker and Fisher were last year? Thoughts on that, who that may be as we head in those last few weeks of spring?
Yeah, obviously that's a really significant question that Indiana has to answer here, and because as you said, it really was a dynamic duo last year. Aiden Fisher got a lot of the publicity, but Jalen Walker was fantastic. Every time I watched Indiana play last year, he made some incredible number of plays. He was all over the field. I think he's going to be a very, very good NFL player. So those guys are not easy to replace, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the good news is that Indiana does have a guy in Aiden Fisher who is going to help bring along whoever it is. And I do think that that's a key because you're working together with these guys, right?
Yeah.
It's not one of those things where you're kind of freelancing. So Fisher, knowing the system as well as he does, this is going to be his fourth year in the system. Him knowing that as well as he does is going to help him bring along whoever it is and really give them someone to lean on. So I think they'll figure it out. But boy, is Jalen Walker a tough guy to replace. He's really, really good. One of the best linebackers I've ever seen in Indiana.
Yeah, and the one big thing about that is Walker had some injuries the last year, and there were games that he wasn't playing the entire game or missed half the game because of a nagging shoulder injury. I think that he had pretty much from his time at James Madison. And the thing about it was they really didn't suffer too big a drop off when they used the two guys that they subs with them most of the time last year. And so I think with that alone gives you hope and promise that I don't think Aiden Fisher is going to feel too lonely at that tandem position with whoever earns that spot. And if they have to play two guys a significant amount of reps to play, to create one body, then so be it. But honestly, I do think Indiana right now, defensively speaking, I think you have to say, I believe that they're even going to be better come their first game of the season than they were a year ago, at least in the back half of their defense. And if you look at their secondary, I think they're going to have a secondary that was even better than this year's secondary because of who they added from the portal and brought back Lewis Moore. I think the biggest question defensively is up front, but I haven't seen or heard anybody sounding the alarm bells as if they feel they've got those guys, especially the Wheeler kid that came in from Western Kentucky. They think he's a beast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, losing what they lost with C.J. West and James Carpenter up front is obviously difficult, right? That's always one of the most important positions on your defense, and so if you lose both of those guys, you're obviously going to have questions. But I do think that Tyreek Tucker was a very good player last year, kind of as that third defensive tackle, guy that came over from James Madison and knows the system. But beyond that, as you said, Wheeler, the kid from Western Kentucky, all Conference USA guy. Every time you watched him again, another guy who just jumps off the screen is a guy who has, with this coaching staff, it's not really surprising, a high motor and can really play up front. And so you have those two guys, and you think you're able to figure it out. I do think your comment about the back end being even better is pretty astute because bringing in Lewis Moore, he was one of the guys that I thought was most difficult to lose from the final Tom Allen team. Going to Ole Miss, he didn't play badly at Ole Miss. It's not like he was buried on the bench. He played for a team that very nearly went to the college football playoff, and he was a leader of that defense in 2023. So I'm fascinated to see how he fits in because obviously you're a leader. You go away, then you come back. Are you still a leader? How do you fit in the new pecking order? I think he'll be able to figure that out. He's a really confident guy back there. That was something I remember from him. And so I like having him back there. And then obviously they brought in several corners that they can play next to D'Angelo Pons. Obviously, D'Angelo Pons is going to be the number one guy, but who do you have next to him? Is it Ryland Gandy? Is it Amarian Knighton? Is it Jamari Sharp, who has been coming on for a couple of years here? So I am fascinated by that back end. I think it's going to be very good. Amari Farrell is another one of my favorite players from IU last year. I thought he was terrific all season. So they are really set back there. And I do think that if Wheeler is as good as advertised, I think IU is in pretty good shape.
Yeah. And one of the question there, Moore was at Ole Miss last year. He had left and went into the portal, and Ole Miss had gave him a bunch of money, and he wanted to go test the grass on the other side, per se. And when he saw what Indiana was doing and things of that nature, he thought he'd be best to come back around a group of guys that he was very familiar with. And Indiana wanted him back. He was an all Big Ten kid under Tom Allen. And I know for sure that that was a huge get in the secondary for them. And I do think that they feel pretty confident in what he brings to it. And, of course, Boykin at the safety spot. And you said, who was the kid from Pitt? I can't remember his name right off. You just mentioned it.
Ryland Gandy.
Gandy. He will be probably the guy that's in tandem at cornerback for Indiana, as well as Pons will be the two top corners, I think, heading into the fall. And I tell you, that's a pretty scary group there because of what Coach Haynes likes to do with his defense, and that being putting guys in man-to-man, especially Pons, and if you have Gandy that can do it now you can put two guys out on an island and feel fairly comfortable with them and let them do what they got to do. And then next thing you know, you're able to gang up on some people and make it difficult for them and force quarterbacks into making hurried throws. So, yeah, I think right now I'm as confident about the defense more so than anything heading into this year, as opposed to last year where you kind of had that question mark, wait and see. Now, losing Carpenter, losing CJ West is a definite, production situation, and whether or not Wheeler and et al. Can accommodate for those two losses, we'll see. But from everything that I've heard and talked to, things are riding high on the defense again this year for Brian Haynes. And I don't think you either haven't heard anything other than positive feedback on that question alone.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was interesting what you said about the way Brian Haynes likes to play defense, with the corners being in man on man if they can. And I think that one thing they were able to do so effectively last season was they put those guys on islands. They were able to hold their own, and then that turns the linebackers loose to go get the quarterback, right? And Aiden Fisher did a good job of it. Jalen Walker was spectacular at it. That's how he made a lot of his plays, was just knifing through the line.
Right.
And so I'm interested. Elijah Hardy was pretty good at that last year too, and he's a guy who's going to play next to Aiden Fisher this year on a fairly regular basis. I want to see what they're able to do with him, and if he's able to take another step in just the athleticism to go get the quarterback, right? Because they
Right.
were really good at dialing up blitzes last year, and putting the quarterback in really difficult situations. Obviously, again, that goes back to the defensive front, right? If the defensive tackles are eating up there, then that's a lot easier. But it's one of those things where the linebackers have to have the athleticism to finish it off too. And with Hardy and Fisher, they do. So it's one of those things where if the corners hold up, they're in pretty good shape here.
Yeah, no question. And I know that everything right now down in Bloomington is probably the most optimistic I've ever seen Bloomington when it comes to their athletic program, with the success of football this past year, getting themselves into the tournament, first time ever in that regard in the season that they had. And then add to that basketball hiring, the new basketball coach. The optimism in Indiana right now is night and day to when I've ever noticed it in terms of feeling they've got football on the right track. They've got basketball now on the right track. And if everything can go as planned, Indiana could have one of those programs now that is spoken about when you talk about dominant football and basketball teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those things where it's about as good as on both fronts as it's ever been. Although the basketball team still has to put together a roster, right? These next 6
Right.
weeks are going to really tell a whole lot about whether that optimism is founded, but it certainly seems to be headed in a good direction. One thing I'm interested in going forward here, and this is just something I've been going over in my mind here, is with the revenue sharing coming in here. probably this summer and going into to next season, is you're going to have $21.5 million in the athletic department to kind of spread around, right? How much of that is going to football? How much of it is going to basketball? Obviously, you can do NIL on top of that, but it's a little bit constrained because it can't be pay for play. It has to be very specific NIL for your likeness and things like that. So there's going to be a limited, at least somewhat limited pool of money here. How is Scott Dolson, who is probably going to be the one making these decisions in the end, how is he going to divide between football and basketball? Because obviously you'd think Indiana, being a basketball school for a very long time, would give more than the average school to basketball, right? Give Darren DeVries everything he needs to build a great basketball team. But obviously you don't want to shortchange Curt Cignetti either. And they've made clear they are planning on investing in this football program over the long term with the contract they gave Cignetti and the one they gave his assistants. So I'm interested to see how that pot of money gets doled out here over the next couple of years and the investments that Indiana makes in both of those sports.
Well, a couple things on that, because I've been doing some research and hoping to bring more of that to the table here on the Hoosier.com, is one, April 17th is an important date for two reasons. One, it's spring football for Indiana, the game at 8 p.m. in Memorial Stadium. But the second thing is that April 17th is also the date of the finalizing the NCAA versus the House lawsuit out in California for approval. Now, one thing that I do know of, and kind of to answer your question, is number one, football and basketball by sheer numbers alone is vastly different. So right now, you know that the bigger chunk of the money is going to go to football. It's probably going to be on the neighborhood of about 80% of that, with another 10% men's basketball, 10% women's basketball, something to that extent in that breakdown. But I've heard as much as that, because you think that you're going to have 105 players that are going to benefit from that, as opposed to 15 players in basketball. And remember now, there's no walk-ons, there's no preferred walk-ons. Everybody theoretically is on a scholarship per se. These are some of the things that I think we're going to find out very quickly this summer, because as soon as this is done and finalized, I know the Big Ten is operating off of $20.5 million as being that number. And I was reading an article today on ESPN about the Big Ten, I think, and a couple other conferences are actually going to hire an outside group, because now every NIL deal will have to go through a clearinghouse, so that it values what that person should be making based upon what so-and-so made at that position a year ago or whatever. So kind of like a salary cap sheriff in terms of that. So because NIL right now is still on the outside of the university, they don't have anything to do with it. And I know they were trying to get that changed so everything was under one house because of how they wanted to, do all this. So they actually went out and hired, I think it's Deloitte group, to be the quote unquote NIL sheriff and determine whether an NIL deal is on the up and up and it's for the value for a particular player. So it's going to be an interesting summer just because of that, Dylan, because we still don't know what all those numbers are and how that all works. And, you've got every agent out there under the sun right now that wants to have a understanding if the number one running back in the country last year made $1.5 million through NIL, and you had the number two guy. Well, they're going to ask for at least $1.5 million in NIL money, but does that go up against the cap, or how does that restructure the cap in terms of how they are getting paid by revenue sharing and all this stuff that hasn't been totally laid out verbatim as the roster limits, is a walk-on now a scholarship player because there's no more walk-ons? Are they not signing scholarships now? Are they signing letters of employment with the dedicated amount given for each salary, position? There is so much that's going to have to be done in a short period of time that it's going to be interesting to see on how all that is enforced, because the NCAA is not going to have much to say in it as far as enforcement goes. Your thoughts on all that, or if you've heard anything different?
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much nailed it. It is a question now of my question has been for the last several weeks here, and as I've dug into this more, is this clearinghouse that you're talking about, my understanding is that's what is going to happen. Is there's going to be a clearinghouse. It's going to be run by Deloitte, and they're going to determine whether these NIL deals are actual NIL or whether they are against the cap rules. Basically, and there are going to be some rules here. Now, the question I have is, the first time one of these players signs an NIL deal, and Deloitte, the Deloitte clearinghouse says no, that one is not allowed. Why doesn't that player just go to the courts and sue again? And we're right back here where we started. So it's
I heard. This, I must preface this. This is based on innuendo and doing some research on the whole matter, is that they're going to have a pretty well established rules and such that are pretty much ironclad against running to the courts, like you said, and trying to do something that way, or a judge putting in a injunction, and it won't be determined until like 6 years down the road or whatever. But that's going to be the determining factor. I think I end up taking like the 20.5 million and figured based upon 80% of that and dividing that number by 105. So assuming everybody was the same in football, it came out to each player getting at least like $250K, right? Now, is that what they're going to do? Is give everybody the same amount and let the NIL be the separation between the value of somebody? Or is the school going to tier that based upon the year of the player and based upon the number of years you play? So a senior's going to get X, a junior's going to get, Y, and so forth and so on. Those are the things that we don't know and how that's all going to play out. And what is the cap number, right? I've never heard anything about a cap. I mean, that's the thing that we all sit around and say, well, that's the most logical thing because of the NFL. Well, there's been no cap number. So now you're going to implement a cap. I don't know how that all plays into the equation. And this goes back to the schools wanting NIL underneath them because of that very reason, that they could do all this and keep everything under their roof and saying, we're going to give you X amount of dollars from here and X amount of dollars from NIL, because someone's value NIL may be a heck of a lot better than the next person's NIL value, right? Because that's what it's supposed to be based on, Twitter followers, TikTok, and all that stuff. So stay tuned, I guess is what I'm saying. Dylan Sinn of the Journal Gazette, he'll have all his say there. Get that online. And then, of course, the Hoosier.com, I'm sure, will be on top of it as well as soon as this ruling comes down, because those parameters will be, at that point in time, out for everybody to see in that regard. So quick thing here before I let you go, and we kind of got off on a tangent there because that is the topic of top of mind topic right now, is this settlement that's coming down the road. Offensively speaking, I think Curt Cignetti feels pretty confident with the offensive line, that he's got a group of guys that he feels confident in that has gained some of that depth issue in terms of backups and such. Coogan being the big time signing for them via the portal, the 6'5", 310-pounder from Notre Dame. It was interesting to hear him talk to the press the other day about why he came to Indiana and, having going against them in the tournament and such. And I know it sounds like Curt Coach Signetti does have a pretty good confidence in that group. Wide receiver, we've talked about the possibility there as it pertains to them jumping out. Running back, I would say, I think the top two is probably going to be Hemby and Black, with the BB kid coming in at that third spot. But anything you're taking away from any of those things that I mentioned there, but even the running back group, because that really hasn't been discussed overly too much. And then we'll get to the quarterback situation here in a second.
Yeah, I'll start with Coogan, especially. I covered Notre Dame too, as you know, so I have a little bit of a perspective there. And he is a mauler. He's really good. And the only reason he transferred was because he was the backup center, or he was a backup guard to start last season, ended up being a backup center, and then Notre Dame center got hurt. And so he started the rest of the year. He started basically 12 games in a row to finish the season, started all the way through to the national championship game. And then the Notre Dame center came back, obviously, this offseason. So he was like, all right, well, I can go get a spot at another team that made the college football playoff. And as he said, it was good to see Indiana. Like, Indiana had so much momentum, it made that the right destination for him. So I thought that was really interesting as well. He's a very, very good player and a great anchor for that line. At running back, I think you're right with Hemby and Black. Crucially, BB has 2 years of eligibility left, and they only have one. So I think you probably want to prioritize them at least to start, unless for some reason Lee Beebe comes in and just sets the world on fire and is the obvious number one. But Hemby especially is interesting because he has a lot of miles on him. He's been at Maryland a long time. He's had a lot of carries. They used him as a workhorse. So having someone like Kalen Black and someone like Lee Beebe to really take the weight off his shoulders of being a 25, 30 carry a game back, I think that's going to be huge for him to keep him fresh over the course of the season. It's going to have to be by committee this year, because I don't think Hemby is a guy who's going to want 30 carries a year before he goes to the NFL again.
No, and I do think, number one, Keon Black, although he kind of faded out of the top two as the year went on, they still utilized him in critical situations, because when they needed to get critical yards and they needed it right then and right now, he was the guy they, would go to in situations. And the fact that, he's kind of a beast guy. I mean, he runs hard. He's got a good, good size frame on him. But Hemby, if, like you said, gives him that big bristled back that can get the tough yards, but what he has more so than anything is that top end speed that can take a 3 to 5 yard gain and make it a 90-yard touchdown. So I think that's one thing. And I think BB is one of those guys that's a slasher that can really do stuff in space, kind of like Ellison was. So I definitely don't want to discount him, because he had a pretty good year at UAB last year. And the one thing about Hemby is he can catch the ball out of the backfield, which I think is huge in this offense in terms of what they would like to do in that regard. So I do think they're in good hands at running back. I think they're in good hands up front. Wide receiver, I still think they're good, even though they lost Tyler Morrison to injury. And last position, but not least, is the quarterback position. Fernando Mendoza is the guy they brought in. I saw his NIL evaluation on on3.com. And for those of you that want to be a part of the Hoosier.com, we're now powered by on3.com. His NIL evaluation is like 1.1 million. So not to say that Coach Signetti is paying him 1.1 million, but at the same time, that's an interesting dynamic. But it sounds as if he's starting to understand the offense. I know Coach Signetti says a lot of transfers and first years, for the first half are struggling. They're thinking too much and all that. Now they're getting to that point now where they understand it, they're more comfortable in it, and they're just playing and letting it rip. And I think that's where Fernando is right now in this equation. And he's even admitted it's helped having Alberto around, because he's been through it for a year. But I do think it's Fernando. He's the guy. Although we may not get an announcement, I do think he's the guy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that would be my guess as well. I can't imagine, just having seen them do drills a couple of times, I can't imagine it's going to be anyone else. He is obviously not just in terms of, well, he has the resume, but you watch him on the field there. He is the best of the quarterbacks they have. Man, can that kid sling it. He really, really can. And I think one thing that makes him interesting as a transfer guy is that he was a real team leader at Cal.
Mm-hmm.
He was a guy who his team rallied around, who they really enjoyed playing with, and he seems to be bringing that same thing to Indiana. Like he was up there talking to the media. I think it was last week, and you can just see he exudes excitement about being in Indiana. I think that's how, as a transfer, you go about putting yourself in a position of leadership in the locker room, is letting everyone know, hey, I'm really glad that I'm here. We're going to go win some games together. And you have to do that on a really quick turnaround as a transfer, because you only have, 6 months from the time he signed to the time they really have to get going for fall camp. So it has to be a quick process, but he seems like the kind of guy who is going to be able to make that happen. And again, on top of that, he can really, really throw the football. So he has the intangibles, he has the physical tools. I think he's going to be really good for this team.
Yeah, two things that I think I agree with you about his arm. He does have a pretty good whip that he throws around with, and he proved that last year at Cal. He was voted a captain, and he wasn't a starter at the time. That just shows something there about how his teammates perceive him. And if you want to listen why Indiana was invested in him, just go watch that interview that you just referenced, and you can tell from a articulate, thoughtful, mindful answers, those transition to the field, and you can see why Indiana's was after him as a heir apparent to Curtis Rourke, because Curtis had some of those abilities as well in front of the microphone. The only thing I would say with him is he's got to get a little bit stronger. I do think he was a little on the thin side, and I'm surprised that he lasted at Cal, because he got sacked some 40 times last year. So taking a hit is not a question mark for him. I do think he could aid by getting some weight underneath him, and I think he has added some strength to his arm and set like that. Now, we'll see who takes over that backup spot. And they brought in Grant Wilson, a kid that they played against when he was at Old Dominion, and Coach Signetti was at James Madison. When they were there, he actually had his best career day against JMU. For yards passed in a season that day. So there's some familiarity there. He's a big kid. He's 6'5". So there's nothing there. Then you got Alberto, who is a redshirt sophomore now. So those are the top three. And then after that, you get Jacob Bell coming in, as well as a couple other ones. But there's the depth problem. I think there's still an issue there with losing Tyler Cherry like they did. That's the one thing that concerns me at that spot, is that they just don't have a lot of depth, and you got to have at least two that can play. Now, do they? I think they do. But that's speculation at that time. I'm interested to see how the spring goes. Your thoughts on those other two, Wilson and of course Fernando's brother Alberto?
Yeah, I think both of those guys bring something different to the table, right? I think Wilson he's an experienced guy. He started in the FBS before. He has he's played a lot of college football, which is a phrase that Kurt Signetti likes to use. And so I think he'll be fine. If you need him to go in the game, he's not going to probably lead you to a win, but he can avoid losing a game for you. I think that's what they have in him. With Alberto, I think Alberto actually is a better thrower of the football than Grant Wilson is. So I'm interested to see, because that was my read from kind of just watching them in drills, was that he just seems to be a little bit more assertive with the football. He can throw it a little bit harder and kind of hit guys between the numbers a little bit more often. So I'm interested to see how that dynamic plays out and who they end up naming the backup, because this is Alberto's second year in the program. If he has some physical tools, you'd think that he would have an opportunity to really earn that position here. Really be the backup quarterback this season, with the potential to be the heir apparent next season. So
well, yeah,
I'm interested to see how that plays out this offseason.
Sorry there. Didn't mean to walk on you. But the thing that's nice about Fernando is he's got 2 years. He's got 2 years.
You're right. I apologize. There you go.
That's the beauty of it is, they got Curtis for a year and glad they did. And because he was what he was, but they get Fernando for 2 years. And again, like you said, Alberto has his opportunity. We don't know what will happen with Tyler Cherry. He's supposedly coming back. Now he's going to spend a year as a student assistant because they don't want to put him on a roster spot as coveted as those are. But from all the things that I've heard, they're high on Alberto just because of what you said. He's got a good arm and he moves very well, very mobile. And that's the thing that I think Coach Shanahan and having Fernando this year, we'll see a little bit more pocket moving and different launch points to help that offensive line out where they couldn't do it a year ago because of Curtis's knee. So we'll see what all happens. Well, Mr. Sinn, I appreciate you joining me here this evening. You're going to be blacked out here in a few minutes if I don't get you out of here in your kitchen there. But I appreciate you being my first guest here on the Hoosier Football Tailgate on thehoosier.com, powered by on3.com. So thank you for joining me on my first episode with thehoosier.com, and we'll see you down the road, my man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and congratulations to you on joining On3.
I appreciate it. And that is Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal Gazette here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I appreciate him joining me here this evening as he always adds to the conversation and discussion here. Got a chance here real quick to get ourselves back into what I wanted to do here before I turn it off tonight. And I don't want to occupy too much time because things are going on. And fortunately enough, I've been absent here for the last week or so because of the NCAA basketball kicking off on Thursday night. So we've all been enjoying the NCAA tourney. And then, of course, this weekend, 4 number 1 teams. First time in, I think, a number of years that we've had 4 number 1 seeded teams in the Final Four, which I think will be excellent basketball heading into this weekend. So I hope everybody enjoys it. Now, I want to talk here, and I thank Dylan for joining me to really give a breakdown of at the halfway point here on the Hoosier.com as it pertains to spring practice and such. But I do want to take a segment here to talk about Brody McWhorter, a quarterback out of Georgia. And I'm going to try to switch over here to my proper screen, if I can. We'll see here as we load up. There we go. I think this young man, about 6'2", about 200 pounds, really good looking kid. I want to show you on tape. He is a 4-star. He's in Indiana's in his top 5, and he will be making an announcement here come May the 15th. And Indiana is up against other true power programs. To sit here and say that I can remember off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure. And I don't want to misspeak on that, but I did want to take a look at him here on tape as we go through some of this and watch him throw the football here. And one thing you're going to see with this young man, this is a great throw into the boundary. This is, let's go back one there. This is a corner route that he's going to throw to the inside receiver right here. And you're going to watch him drop back. He gets good depth, good rhythm on his drop. He hits that plant foot there, and then he's going to get rid of the ball. He's got a pretty good delivery. The only thing he may do at times is wind up, but for the most part, you see him here doing a great job of avoiding the rush, getting up underneath in it, and then buying some time and then getting it into the end zone. Now, what I will say on this is that yes, this is a highlight tape, so he's going to look good on every throw. Now, what I'm going to try to do is show what makes IU want this kid, even though they're up against everybody and anybody, and beyond the fact that he's a 4-star. Now, 4-star for me and for you, or a kid that's a 5-star, those are what you call no doubters. You know, you throw on film and you can see the athleticism, the strength, and so forth and so on. But it has to go much more than that, than just that from a quarterback's perspective. Again, you can kind of see what I mean by winding up here. You see how he's dropping his elbow here and how he's winding back up. Now, there's nothing wrong with his delivery here. I like everything about it, but that's one thing they'll try to quicken up when he gets to the next level. And they're actually working on that with Fernando as well, because Fernando does it a little bit as well. But I like the way he's a big, tall, lanky kid, good drop. When he puts that plant foot, you can see him start to transition his weight right there. And he's looking for that dig route to come open. And there he's finishing high and the follow through. And I tell quarterbacks, when you tell them this, you can see it here. His throwing hand is motion where he finishes is like trying to go grab $1 out of his left pocket. And that helps bring that right shoulder through. And that keeps the ball on an even trajectory. It's not rising up or, going into the ground. It's finishing on the same plane. And he does a very good job of that. Here's another one where they're doing a little play action, quick throw slant. He does a little bit of a sidearm here. Not too bad. But this one, you can see he's much quicker. You see how quicker he was as opposed to the last one? That's definitely, he's aware of it. And he rips it, and a great shot to the wide receiver, and big play for him. Here's a little bit of a quarterback read. Now, I'm not sure he was correct here because there's 2 guys on the outside, but this shows you his athletic ability. This should be a dead play. Let's see if I can pause it here for a second. Because you see that outside guy, the guy that they are reading, if I can draw this correctly, is that guy right there that's rushing. This guy is free, so he should really make the play in theory. But you can see his athletic ability. He beats it, and he's able to split the seam there, and he turns in what could have been a catastrophe into a big-time run. So he does have some athleticism. Here's another big-time throw on the boundary, throwing the out cut. You can tell he's taking what we call a big 3. He's chopping it down a little bit, which is not anything major in his footwork as it pertains to this one. But you can see his eyes are in good positioning, and he spins it right on the boundary on the outside. That was a really good throw. Again, kind of a chop down throw here. He's going to throw a streak on the outside, and he hits his top step, boom, and he hitches up and lets it go. Now, he may need to get rid of that hitch up. He may not be able to, get away with that where he wants to be throwing it when he hits that top thing there. Let's go back to that last play. Another good quick delivery, kind of throwing some of the things that Indiana did. Here's the other thing, sprint out, things that Indiana could do more of and help change the launch point of everything. He does a great job of pressuring the corner. I'd like to see him attack the line of scrimmage a little bit more, but for the most part, he was pretty good there. Another play action, post route over the top, gets plenty of air underneath it. That's what I like to see. And what we tell quarterbacks when they throw, my fingers are twitchy tonight. When they throw these type of routes, you want to get good air underneath it so that they can run, the wide receiver can run underneath it, and that's kind of what he does there, which is really good. Now here's a quarterback design run, quarterback power. This play is going to hit in the backside A gap. Does a good job of riding the fake, and he's hitting that backside A gap because the linebacker overruns it, and they've got a light box. They've only got 5 guys in there, so this should be a really good play because you essentially have an extra blocker. And he does a good job getting north and south and getting a big play. This was probably his best throw this was the one that, for me, that kind of did it in some respects, where he just kind of rips it in there. It was a great catch and a good throw at the same time, but ends up in a big play. So this kid, it's going to be interesting as it pertains. He's going to throw another big ball here. This is a great throw. Again, he's going to throw it deep up at the top. He's going to take a shot here as well. He stays in the pocket. He gets his feet underneath of him, off the drop, hitches up, and lets her rip. And that's just a great thrown ball, as it got taken out there at the end. But again, I preface all this is that, yes, that's a highlight film. You're going to see all good plays there, not many bad plays. This kid has the ability to be a really, really good big-time quarterback. He's got size. He's got length. I think he's got pretty good arm strength to be able to throw any type of football. Of course, he's going to have to add some muscle to that frame of his. But from what I've seen of him, even though it's been via video, I could see why Coach Shanahan and Whitmer are excited about this kid, and Indiana being in that top 4 for his services, I think bodes well for them to potentially get this young man out of Georgia. Time will tell. We got until May 15th, and I'm sure they're putting all the sugar on him as they possibly can. But we'll find out. But I do think that kid has the opportunity to be a guy that Indiana has a chance of getting in this next recruiting class. And if they can get him, they'll be well served, him coming in to be wearing the Indiana uniform for years to come. So I'm excited for the potential. I'm sure Coach Signetti and Whitmer and Shanahan and all of them are excited. We'll see what all happens with that as we go along. I want to thank you again for joining me here on my first evening with the Hoosier.com, powered by On3.com. Again, if you want to subscribe, you can head over to the Hoosier.com. It's $1, then 50% off for the rest of the year after the first month. It's a heck of a deal. You get everything that is on the Hoosier.com that pertains to Indiana football, basketball. You got it. You want it, you got it. Everything right there at your fingertips. We've got forums there that have different message boards. I will be active on those as well. And a great group of guys there as well. I talked about Zach Browning, who's been on here with me, and Alec Lastly, that I've gotten to know here over the last couple of days, and others. They just do a great job. And I know that's where their passion lies, and I think they do a great job covering all sports, including basketball. And there's a lot of content up now there for the basketball program after a great hire again by Dolson going out and getting a prize out of West Virginia. I think he's going to be another one that we all can be looking for him to put together a talented group of players and getting things done there in the sport of basketball. And again, we're excited to see where we're at in football. We'll have that chance April 17th at Memorial Stadium, 8 o'clock. Until then, check out thehoosier.com for all the different things that you want to check out. I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you there on thehoosier.com. But for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. You've been watching the Hoosier Football Tailgate, brought to you by thehoosier.com. Have a great weekend, everybody.